Ethan Carter was a quiet man who never thought life would bring him to the royal court. He had grown up in a small town, flying small crafts and fixing broken machines. He never cared for politics or noble houses. To him, the world of kings and queens felt far away, like something out of a story. But everything changed when a messenger in fine clothes arrived at his door with a sealed letter. The letter carried the crest of Queen Helena. His name had been called. He was ordered to appear before the court and take part in a ceremony that was known across the kingdom. The ceremony of choosing a bride. Ethan did not understand why his name was chosen. He was not from a noble house. He was not rich or famous. He had never even stood inside the grand halls of the palace. Yet the letter was clear. Refusal was not possible. He was compelled to go. His neighbors watched him leave with wide eyes. Some envied him, some pitied him, and some whispered that the queen had gone mad to summon a man like him. Ethan kept silent, his heart heavy with doubt. The journey to the capital took 2 days. When he entered the city, he felt lost among the tall towers, glowing lights, and the endless sound of people. Guards led him to the palace gates. They were taller than any building he had seen, made of shining metal and stone, covered in carvings of kings and queens long gone. Inside, the palace was filled with voices, music, and the smell of burning incense. The sound of footsteps echoed across polished floors. Every wall seemed to tell a story. Every corner held a secret. Ethan felt small, like a man who did not belong. At last, he entered the great hall. The queen sat on her throne, calm and steady. To her right stood her council, men and women who watched with sharp eyes. Before him, lined in rows, were the daughters of noble families. Each wore bright gowns, jewels, and smiles that did not reach their eyes. They looked at Ethan as if measuring his worth, could feel their judgment. He had been told that he must pick one among them, a bride who was said to be perfect, a bride who would bring balance to the kingdom. But to Ethan, it felt like a trap. The noble daughters each had their charms. Some were known for beauty, others for wealth, and some for their clever words. Yet Ethan could not see them as the court saw them. Their faces seemed more like masks than truths. He felt like he was standing in a market where he was forced to choose something precious that he did not understand. He wondered why he, of all men, was brought here. He wondered if this was fate or a cruel mistake. As he stood in silence, he noticed one figure at the edge of the line. She did not hold her head high like the others. She did not smile or try to catch his eye. Her gown was simple compared to the rest, but her presence was strong. Her name was Leora, the princess who had lived through sorrow and carried whispers of scandal. The court did not speak her name with pride, and he wished she had been hidden away. Yet Ethan felt drawn to her. She looked not like a woman trying to shine, but like someone who had already faced storms. The hall grew quiet. The queen's voice rang clear. Ethan was told to make his choice. The eyes of the court pressed on him, heavy and cold. He was meant to say the name of one perfect bride, the one the council expected, but Ethan's heart beat harder. He looked at the shining daughters and their jewels, then at the quiet princess who seemed apart from them all. In that moment, he felt something stir within him, realized the choice was not about perfection. It was about truth. It was about the courage to see beyond what others demanded. Ethan took a breath and prepared to speak, knowing the word he chose might shake the walls of the court forever. The morning sun lit the palace walls with a pale glow, but the halls of the court were colder than ever. Word of Ethan's choice had spread through every corner. Servants carried the story with lowered voices. Nobles sharpened their anger into bitter whispers. The council prepared to strike, convinced that Ethan's choice of Leora was not only foolish, but dangerous. The grand hall, once filled with music and pride, now felt like a place waiting for judgment. When Ethan walked into the hall again, every eye turned to him. The noble daughters stood aside, some watching with scorn, others with hidden curiosity. Leora entered behind him, her steps measured, her face calm, though her eyes betrayed a deep unease. The queen sat upon her throne, her gaze fixed upon them both. For a moment, silence held the hall still. Then the council began to speak. One by one, the counselors rose, their voices filled with anger. They accused Ethan of insulting the tradition of the kingdom. They said Leora was unfit, that her past was stained, that no man in his right mind would tie himself to her. Some even demanded the choice be undone, replaced with one of their favored daughters. The words cut sharp, meant to humiliate and crush. Ethan listened in silence, but his hands clenched at his sides. The queen raised her hand to quiet them. She spoke with calm strength, saying that the choice had been made and would not be erased. But she also declared that if Ethan and Leora wished to stand by this choice, they must prove their worth. The court demanded more than words. It would face trials of loyalty, courage, and truth. Only then would the choice be respected. Till then the court would watch with sharp eyes, waiting for failure. Ethan met Leora's eyes. For the first time since the ceremony, she did not look away. She gave the faintest nod, as if to say she was ready to face what came. Together, they stepped forward. The council announced the first trial would be of loyalty. Ethan and Leora would be placed in chambers where lies and temptations would surround them. They must hold their trust in each other, or the court would see them broken. That night they were led to a dim hall lit by torches. Guards closed the doors behind them. They were told to stay within until dawn. In the silence, Ethan spoke first. "They want us to fail," he said. "They want us to doubt each other." Leora looked at him with steady eyes. "They have wanted me to fall for years. You have tied yourself to that. You should know what they will do." Ethan shook his head. "I knew when I spoke your name. I will not take it back." The night stretched long. Strange voices whispered from unseen corners. Shadows moved as if alive. At times, Ethan thought he saw shapes of the noble daughters, offering him comfort. Urging him to abandon Leora, he turned away, his heart steady. Leora, too, was tested. She thought she heard old friends mocking her, reminding her of betrayals and broken promises. But she stood firm, reminding herself of Ethan's words. The trials pressed hard, but neither gave in. When dawn came, the guards opened the doors. The council stood waiting, their faces sharp with expectation. Ethan and Leora stepped out, side by side, tired but unbroken. The whispers that filled the hall shifted. Some still doubted, but others began to see a spark of strength they had not expected. The council was displeased, but they could not deny the truth. The first trial had not broken them. The queen watched silently, her expression unreadable. Yet when her eyes met Ethan's, he felt that she saw something more. Perhaps even she was surprised by the choice he had made, and by the bond that had begun to grow. For now, the court remained frozen, caught between doubt and wonder. The trials were not over. Greater challenges lay ahead. But Ethan and Leora walked forward together, knowing that whatever came, they would not stand alone. The court waited for Ethan to speak. The queen sat still on her throne, her eyes calm but watchful. The council members leaned forward as if they already knew what name would leave his lips. The noble daughters stood proudly, their jewels shining under the bright lights of the hall. They were sure that Ethan would choose one of them. Each believed herself to be the perfect bride, the one the court wanted. The silence grew heavy, and Ethan felt the weight of it pressing on his chest. He looked at the long line of women once more. Their beauty was clear, their smiles carefully made, their presence polished like the walls of the palace. Yet when his eyes fell on Leora again, something in him would not let go. She stood apart, quiet, not seeking attention, not hiding either. She looked almost fragile, yet her eyes carried a strength that none of the others showed. Ethan's heart chose before his mind had the chance to argue. He spoke her name. The hall froze. No one moved. The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in deep thought. The counselors gasped, and then voices erupted. Some cried out that this was madness. Others accused Ethan of disrespect. Few laughed bitterly, as though he had ruined himself in the ceremony. Leora lowered her eyes, as if she already knew the storm would come. Ethan stood firm, though inside his chest his heart raced. He knew he had gone against what the court wanted, but he could not take the words back. The queen raised her hand, and the hall fell into silence again. Her voice was calm as she repeated the choice so all would hear. Ethan had chosen Leora. The sound of her name echoed across the stone walls. The noble daughters looked at each other with shock and anger. Some hid their disappointment, others did not. Counselors whispered among themselves, their faces pale and tight. For a moment it felt as if the whole court had been shaken from its foundation. Ethan glanced at Leora, She met his eyes only for a moment, then looked away. He could not tell what she felt. Was it fear, shame, or something else he could not name? He only knew that she seemed real in a hall full of masks. He did not regret his choice, though he knew the path ahead would not be easy. After the ceremony, Ethan was led through long halls into a smaller chamber where Leora was waiting. The guards closed the doors, leaving the two of them alone. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, yet it felt different from the silence of the court. Leora finally lifted her eyes to him. There was no anger there, only a quiet sadness. "You should not have chosen me," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but it carried years of pain. "The court will not forgive this. They will turn on you. They will turn on me harder than before." Ethan shook his head. "I chose you because it felt right. I could not choose someone else just to please them. I don't know what will come, but I know I don't regret it." Leora looked at him with surprise, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her. She turned away, hiding the faintest trace of emotion. "They will test us," she said. "They will make us prove that this choice was not weakness. And if we fail, they will tear us apart." Ethan stepped closer, though he kept his voice steady and low. "Then we will face it together." That night, word spread across the palace. Servants whispered in corners. Guards exchanged uneasy looks. Noble families fumed in their private chambers. The choice of Ethan Carter had broken the order of the court. Council gathered in secret, their voices hard with anger. Some called for punishment, others demanded trials. The queen listened in silence, her thoughts hidden from all. The kingdom itself seemed to tremble with the weight of what had happened. Ethan lay awake in the chamber given to him. He thought of the looks, the whispers, the anger that filled the hall. He thought of Leora's eyes, strong but wounded. He knew tomorrow would not bring peace. Tomorrow would bring tests, schemes, and dangers he had never faced before. Yet deep inside, beneath the fear, there was also something else. A small fire of hope. A belief that he had done something that mattered. He closed his eyes, ready to face whatever the dawn would bring. The days that followed were filled with tension. The court was restless, waiting for Ethan and Leora to fail. Rumors spread through the palace like fire. Some said Ethan was a fool who had been blinded by pity. Others whispered that Leora had trapped him with hidden tricks. Every step they took was watched. Every word they spoke was weighed. The council prepared the next trial, one meant to test not only their hearts, but also their strength and courage. On the morning of the trial, Ethan and Leora were brought to the training grounds. The open field stretched wide, surrounded by walls of stone. Nobles filled the stands, their voices buzzing with cruel excitement. Soldiers stood, ready with weapons, waiting to begin the test. A counselor stepped forward and declared the task. Ethan and Leora would face a series of challenges together. They would need to move as one, to defend and protect, to prove that their bond was not built on weakness. If they failed, their union would be broken and their honor stripped. The first challenge was of strength. They were given heavy shields and told to cross the field while soldiers blocked their path. The soldiers were trained and strong, their strikes hard and fast. Ethan held his shield firm, blocking blows while guiding Leora forward. She did not hide behind him. She lifted her shield too, her arms shaking, but her steps steady. Side by side, they pushed through. The crowd jeered, hoping they would fall, but slowly they reached the end together. Sweat covered their faces, but they stood unbroken. The second challenge was of skill. They were given a puzzle of metal rings and shifting locks. It was designed to confuse and waste time. The council expected them to fight over it, to blame each other when mistakes were made. But instead of arguing, Ethan listened to Leora's ideas, and she listened to his. Piece by piece, they solved it. The lock clicked open, and the crowd fell silent for a moment, surprised that they had not failed. The third challenge was of courage. A wall of fire was lit before them, flames rising high. They were told to walk through together. Fear pressed on Ethan's chest, and he could see Leora's hands tremble. The heat was fierce, and the noise of the crowd roared like thunder. Ethan reached for her hand. She did not pull away. Step by step, they moved forward, shielding each other from the flames. The fire licked at their clothes, but they did not stop. When they came out on the other side, The court gasped. The trial that should have broken them had only made them stronger. When the trials ended, Ethan and Leora stood in the center of the field, breathing hard but holding their heads high. The council could not deny what they had seen. They had faced strength, skill, and courage, and they had not fallen. Whispers filled the stands. Some nobles began to wonder if they had underestimated the bond between them. Others grew more bitter, fearful that the order of the court was slipping away. The queen rose from her seat. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp. She declared that Ethan and Leora had passed the second trial. The court fell into silence. Though the council still doubted, they could not argue against the truth of what had been shown. Ethan looked at Leora and saw, for the first time, a faint smile on her lips. It was small, but it was real. That night, the palace felt different. Servants who once whispered against them now spoke with quiet respect. Guards who had doubted now nodded when they passed. Ethan knew not all hearts had changed, but a seed had been planted. The bond between him and Leora was no longer a weakness to laugh at. It was becoming something the court could not ignore. Still, he also knew the hardest trial was yet to come. The court was not finished. It would test them again, and the final test would decide everything. The final trial was announced 3 days later. Court gathered once more in the great hall, their eyes fixed on Ethan and Leora. This time the air felt heavier, filled with the weight of something greater than before. The queen sat high upon her throne, silent and watchful. The council declared that this would be the last test. It would not be of strength, nor skill, nor courage of the body. It would be of truth. They would have to stand before the court and speak from their hearts. If even one word rang false, their union would be broken forever. Ethan felt his heart pound. Words had never been his strength. He was a man of simple life, not trained in the ways of speech. He had no polished phrases or clever tricks, but he also knew he did not need them. He looked at Leora, and she gave him the smallest nod. Together, they stepped forward, facing the sea of doubtful eyes. The counselor asked the first question. Ethan Carter, why did you choose her when you could have chosen perfection? Why tie yourself to someone the court has already judged unworthy? Ethan took a deep breath. His voice was steady, though quiet. Because I did not come here to chase perfection. Perfection is a mask, shines on the outside but tells nothing of the heart. I chose her because I saw truth. I saw a woman who had faced storms and still stood. I saw someone who was real, not pretending to be something she is not. If that makes me a fool, then I will be a fool gladly. The hall stirred with whispers. The counselors frowned, but they could not call his words false. The truth in his voice was clear. Then came the question to Leora. Why did you accept his choice? Do you believe this man can lift you from the shadows of your past? Or do you cling to him out of desperation? Leora raised her chin, her voice calm but strong. I did not ask to be chosen. I did not expect it. But when he spoke my name, I felt something I have not felt in years. I felt seen, not as a failure, not as a scandal, but as myself. He does not look at me with judgment. He looks at me with trust. I will not waste that. If he falls, I will rise with him. If he rises, I will stand beside him. That is not desperation. That is choice. The whispers grew louder, but many in the court fell into silence, struck by the weight of her words. For years they had spoken of her as if she were broken, yet now she stood with more strength than they had imagined. The counselors exchanged uneasy looks. They searched for cracks, for weakness, but found none. The queen rose slowly from her throne. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Leora, then across the hall. When she spoke, her voice filled every corner of the chamber. You came here expecting to see perfection. You expected to see polished masks and flawless smiles. Yet this man chose truth over comfort. This woman chose courage over despair. They have faced your trials and have not broken. They have spoken, and their words carry no falsehood. The court stands frozen, not because of weakness, but because for the first time, we see strength in a different form. The hall grew still. No one dared to speak. The queen's voice carried a final weight. Ethan Carter and Princess Leora will not be cast aside. Their bond will stand and it will be honored. The silence stretched before the sound of applause rose, not from all, but from enough to fill the hall. Some nobles clapped with hesitation, others with sincerity. The council could no longer resist. Ethan and Leora stood together, their hands joined, their faces calm though their hearts beat fast. That night, the palace felt changed. Where once there was only doubt, there was now respect. Where once there was scorn, there was now silence. Ethan knew not everyone accepted them, but they no longer walked alone. They had faced the court, the trials, and the doubts, and they had endured. Their story would be remembered, told in whispers and in songs, of the man who chose not perfection, but truth, and the woman who rose from crisis into strength. The frozen court had seen something new, and it would never forget.